Our earliest ancestors held on to one unassailable truth, that strength was found in each other. Indeed, stretching our legs above the tall grass, we were launched by language and welcomed by an uncertain future. Around the coursing rivers, our hands clasped the earth, and hunters began cultivating the land, giving rise and fall to society. Atop the bones of slaves, wonders were erected which would brush the very fabric of the heavens, and in ivory city-states, knowledge was distilled into reason. Classical empires arose in its presence, spreading far and wide, and when twilight brought them to ruin, the people aimed skywards, met by light which commanded the Orient into a golden age of faith and reason. When dawn arose on the west, it illuminated the face of rebirth, and reason ignited an inferno. Under the banners of their distant kings, their ships crested uncharted waves and met those who were identical and yet opposite. We captured fire and blackened skies with reason, and the differences of our ancestors became deep rifts along false borders. Kings became emperors who wielded their scepters over the entire globe and commanded that the best of humanity would drive the worst of humanity. Tens of millions fell over false differences, and in the ashes of empire, ideology arose phoenix-like to latch its talons into our planet. The unlearned lessons of the first were seen in the second, when reason split the atom and flattened cities.
Our divisions threaten extinction, and yet they still persist. From knowledge to power, one way cannot preside over all, and for a time it seemed as though the final end was on the horizon. And then they came. Unknown, unseen, unspoken, unfelt, they confront us with our final challenge. You take up the dagger and drive it into yourself as our ancestors have, or will you unite with your brethren and meet uncertainty with unity, showing the others who we truly are? Everything comes down to this. Will our species stand the ultimate test of time? Or will we watch as our light is extinguished in the void of space?
Hello, my name is Dr. Nicholas Bauer, lead game theorist working on Inquisition and Invaders, and in this section we will be addressing how to play the left game as to learn about the ways of knowing. To begin, we must make a character. First roll 46s, which are 6-sided dice, and pick the highest 3 rolls each time, repeating 8 times. Assign these values to the abilities which correspond to the 8 ways of knowing, according to the class you want to play. So, for instance, if you plan to play a soldier, faith, sense perception, and intuition will be your highest ability. Each class has its own set of unique priorities with their ability scores, demonstrating their use of their specific ways of knowing. Scientists lean to reason, artists to emotion. These priorities and character builds are extensively covered within the player handbook. So, once values are assigned to the abilities, use the score table in the player handbook to determine the modifiers for each way of knowing. For example, scores of 18 to 19 give +4, 16 to 17 give +3, 14 to 15 +2, and so on and so on. To make an action, that is to seek knowledge or to do something which requires specialized knowledge, roll the corresponding dice and add the modifiers. If it is a skill, for instance, which stands as the use of multiple ways of knowing at once, to gain knowledge, you first roll a d20 and add the corresponding ability modifier. For instance, to gain knowledge through empathy, you roll a d20 and add the imagination and language modifiers. In the game, this signifies that empathy as a specialized knowledge uses language and imagination to come to this knowledge. The corresponding ways of knowing to each skill are outlined on the character sheet, and the appropriate skills for each class are discussed within the player handbook. In the end, the Master of Inquiry will determine how effective the roll was, and he will tell you the effect and the results of the roll or skill. For the use of tools and weapons, first roll a d20 to see if you successfully use the tool or weapon, and if so, roll the corresponding dice, which are usually a d4, d6, or d8, and add the appropriate modifiers to deal some damage. Finally, each class and each level introduces different features into gameplay. These features are very diverse in form and effect, and they and their benefits are outlined within the player handbook. Each of these features reflects the unique knowledge abilities of each class and are gained every level. Remember, stay true to the spirit of role-playing. Make sure to try to authentically play from the background of the characters, as well as only use the knowledge that they are given within the game. If you have any persisting questions, refer to the player handbook for additional details and character building. Happy role-playing to all of you.
In making Inquisition and Invaders, an emphasis on communicating the ways of knowing via the characters and plot was inevitable, as immersion in the game itself is a fun, quick, and effective method to learn. However, we decided to delve below the more obvious modes of communication, and imbue the game itself with the ways of knowing. A player reading the rules and preparing to play is encouraged to use several ways of knowing, and we've included indications of this in the text. While it may be obvious that a player has to use language, reason, or intuition to actually understand the game, we've included explanations of how these ways of knowing are actively being used. At the beginning of both the player and Master of Inquiry handbook, a page of our rules is dedicated to describing how the ways of knowing are being used by every participant before they even begin to play. And throughout the two handbooks, subtle features guide the user towards utilizing their ways of knowing. For example, vivid but short descriptions of the in-game character traits force players to use their imagination in order to roleplay effectively, as they are purposely given only part of the story. Coupled with a written explanation of how imagination actually functions, building up knowledge that hasn't been perceived from previous experiences, this small detail encourages players to understand how the ways of knowing are used in any role-playing game. Even the Master of Inquisition, who leads the game but doesn't necessarily play, is able to learn about their ways of knowing through a similar system. The plot, for example, is set up so that the Master of Inquiry must make further choices based on the player's actions during the course of the game, using reason to decide what will happen next in a logical fashion. This too is reflected in the Master of Inquisition's handbook, allowing both the game player and game leader to recognize how the ways of knowing are used differently by each person in a role-playing game. Altogether, small design details in the player and Master of Inquiry handbook, combined with explicit reference to how the ways of knowing are used, allows our game, Inquisition and Invaders, to communicate the ways of knowing from the very first reading.
Staying true to the theme of D&D, we have incorporated a large variety of characters within our Inquisition and Invader game. These characters all represent the different types of professions and backgrounds that are evident within our society. While we have created some generalized characters such as a scientist, an artist, a humanitarian, and a survivalist, our Inquisition and Invader game consists of several specialized professions within these broader characters as well. Within our character profile, we have designed it in such a manner so that each of the characters coming from this diverse background have expertise in two ways of knowing. In our player handbook, we then address what kind of thought process and tasks are carried out by each of the different ways of knowing, while still staying true to the profession and background of each character. The aim behind using the characters to teach the ways of knowing to our players is to bring the 8 ways of knowing from this abstract standpoint into a more practical and realistic realm. The characters we have in our game are a reflection of the kind of people they're exposed to in their everyday lives and will likely have a general understanding of their professions. So when we incorporate the ways of knowing into these characters, players can truly understand how the different ways of knowing play out in a realistic scenario with realistic people, thus allowing them to extract the pros and cons associated with each way of knowing in an effective manner. Aside from this more explicit way we have incorporated the ways of knowing within our character and their profile, just the utilization of these different characters allow the players to use the ways of knowing in a more subtle manner. One of the primary facets behind the characters in an Inquisition and Invaders is social interaction, as the objective of the game is based upon working cooperatively with a large diversity of other players towards a common goal. This allows for a very consistent use of language as a way of knowing amongst the players, as there will be a substantial amount of dialogue happening, and due to the extreme diversity within the pre-designed characters of the game, the actions that will be collectively decided amongst the players have to do heavily with how the players use language to defend their position and persuade others to join them. Emotion plays a large role in this element of social interaction as well, because of how the players have to not only take in consideration of the emotions that will be associated with their designated character, but they might be triggered to make decisions based upon the kind of emotional response they observe within other players. When looking at reason, their characters will be thrown into many hurdles, and they have to use logic to arrive at solutions and progress along the game. The same thing goes for memory. Throughout the game, as the players level up, they need to remember their past moves, background knowledge, and character description to ensure that whatever choices they make throughout the game is consistent with their character. The whole concept of bringing this abstract character with set powers and characteristics into life relies fully on the imaginative ability of the player. When looking at intuition, this is the kind of game where you need to be able to think intuitively, make quick decisions, all while being in character. In order to fully immerse into the game, a player needs to immerse into their character and the context given, which means they need to have full faith in the imaginative abilities of themselves as well as other characters, as they need to believe that all players are playing this game in the same orchestrated reality. Players also need to have full faith in their own characters, as mentioned before, along with the designated traits to play the role of their character with full conviction.
Role-playing games have played a major role in my life, allowing the imaginative side of my mind to flourish. During adventures in games like Dungeons & Dragons, there is a real immersion into the universe and its story. Your character is an extension of your thoughts, biases, experience, and emotions, even if you try to step away from them. As a consequence of this immersive element, when our team approached the task of making a learning tool for the ways of knowing, we instantly gravitated to role-playing games. The central life essence of these adventures is language and imagination. The dialogue between character and the Master of Inquiry allows for a universe to be born, and it's truly an amazing experience to reflect on the fact that in all of the minds of the characters, a common world is forming, and though there might be nuances to our imaginative perceptions, you can bottle reality through a delivery by language and the actuation through imagination. In playing the game, you can act on your emotions, faith, or intuitions to learn further, as well as through sense perception relayed by the Master of Inquiry. Reason governs the actions of all and makes up the laws of the universe. So the short answer as to why we picked role-playing as the medium for Inquisition and Invaders was to distill how we come to knowledge through the 8 ways of knowing, of which all are used heavily throughout the gameplay and structure. The combination of all of these factors with the prepared textual sources provides an authentic and meaningful demonstration and application of the 8 ways of knowing. In terms of the integration of the 8 ways of knowing through the plot of the game, it is incorporated on multiple levels. First, in designing the ideal alien, we sought to move outside of Hollywood's typical depiction, a logical, emotionless, grey humanoid with malicious intent. Instead, as those who will be vetting Inquisition Invaders will find out, the aliens stand in stark contrast to how we perceive the nature of knowledge and the ways of knowing for ourselves. The aliens do not communicate through language. Instead, their evolution has allowed them to transfer emotional sensations as a form of communication. Through this aspect, the alien's way of knowing challenges our perception of knowledge and how we come to it. This lesson is even more so important when bearing in mind the history told through our trailer, specifically that the predominance of one worldview over others, without accommodation for the fact that knowledge can come in many different forms, has driven humanity apart historically. Through this aspect, the plot provokes reflection on the limitations of the human ways of knowing, and challenges its players to view knowledge in a different light. Furthermore, as knowledge and its use arrives in different forms according to our dispositions, this aspect is underlined during the initial invasion, where this event is viewed differently from multiple perspectives. To correct this, the game challenges its players to reflect on their bias and to break past it, searching for the truth through their gameplay.